What's up, guys? Welcome to October 7th as we dive into Mark chapter 5. Jesus heals a demon possessed man. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained even with the chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrist and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, hollowing and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pig, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully dressed, clothed, and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, but Jesus said, "No, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed at what he told them. Matthew chapter 8, verses 28 to 34. Jesus heals 2 demon-possessed men. When Jesus arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of Gadarenes, 2 men who were possessed by demons met him. They came out of the tombs and were so violent that no one could go through that area. They began screaming at him, "Why are you interfering with the Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before God's appointed time?" There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding in the distance, so the demon begged, "If you cast us out, send us into that herd of pigs." "All right, go," Jesus commanded them. So the demons came out of the men and into the pigs, and the whole herd plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned into the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town, telling everyone what happened to the demon-possessed man. Then the entire town came to meet Jesus, but they begged him to go away and leave them alone. Luke chapter 8, verses 26 to 39. So they arrived in the region of Gerasenes, across the lake from Galilee. As Jesus was climbing out of the boat, a man who was possessed by demons came out to meet him. For a long time he had been homeless and naked, living in the tombs outside the town. As soon as he saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell down in front of him. Then he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already commanded the evil spirits to come out of him. The spirit had often taken control of the man, even When he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles, he simply broke them and rushed into the wilderness completely under the demon's power. Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, for he was filled with many demons. The demons kept begging Jesus not to send them into the bottomless pit. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby, and the demons begged him to let them enter into the pigs. So Jesus gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and into the pigs, and the entire herd plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw it, they fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been freed from the demons. He was sitting at Jesus' feet, fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what happened told the others how the demon-possessed man had been healed, and all the people in the region of Gerasenes begged Jesus to go away and leave them alone, for a great wave of fear swept over them. So Jesus returned to the boat and left, crossing back to the other side of the lake. The man who had been freed from the demons begged to go with him. But Jesus sent him home, saying, "No, go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you." So he went all through the town, proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. Jesus heals in response to faith. Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then the leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her, heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered from 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe, for she thought to herself, "If I can just touch his robe, I will be healed." Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that the healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing it around you. How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman trembled at the realization of what had happened to her, and came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." While he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Just have faith." Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. He went inside and asked, "Why all the commotion and weeping? This child isn't dead. She's only asleep." The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave, and he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Holding her hand, he said to her, "Talitha Koum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had happened, and he told them to give her something to eat. Matthew chapter 9 verses 18 to 26. As Jesus was saying this, the leaders of the synagogue came and knelt before him. My daughter had just died, he said, but you can bring her back to life again if you just come and lay your hand on her. So Jesus and his disciples got up, went with him. Just then a woman who had suffered for 12 years with a constant bleeding came up behind him. She touched the fringe of his robe, for she thought, if I just touch his robe, I will be healed. Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, Daughter, be encouraged. Your faith has made you well. And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus arrived at the official's house, he saw the noisy crowd and heard the funeral song. Get out, he said. He told them, the girl isn't dead, she's only asleep, but the crowd laughed at him. After the crowd was put outside, however, Jesus went in and took the girl by the hand, and she stood up. The report of this miracle swept through the entire countryside. Luke chapter 8 verses 40 to 56. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. Everyone denied it, and Peter said, Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you. But Jesus said, someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out from me. When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, that she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. While he was still speaking to her, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. He told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. But when Jesus heard what had happened, he said to Jairus, don't be afraid. Just have faith, and she will be healed. When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, James, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing, but he said, stop the weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. But the crowd laughed at him because they all knew she had died. Then Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, my child, get up. And at that moment her life returned and she immediately stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were overwhelmed, but Jesus insisted that they not tell anyone what had happened. And so that's the end for today. Something that's really interesting about Jesus is that I think we all have to wonder why is it that Jesus told some people to keep quiet about what he did for them versus others that he did say like, hey, go and share with your family about what God has done for you. So it's just like a realization. It's like sometimes amazing things could happen to us, but that doesn't always mean that we have to share that story. Maybe it's meant to be kept secret for us to appreciate, or whatever it may be. But realizing that not all miracles are meant to be shared with everyone. And so having that discernment in your heart life, saying like, hey God, is there something that you want me to share versus, oh God, thank you for helping me, I experienced this miracle, let me just tell everyone about it. And I think that's good, but you have to find the balance. You have to not I need to stop using the word balance, and you need to figure out, you need to hear from God what He wants for you, from you, you know what I mean? And so that's just something that really stood out to me. And then obviously the woman who was healed is not because of anything that she did, but because she had faith in Jesus, that Jesus can heal her. That is what led her to back to health. That's what healed her. It's not because of anything that she did. But again, I don't know if she would have been healed if she didn't step out in faith, meaning her works reflect her faith. I think that's where it gets really complicated for people. Is that yes, you're not saved through your salvation. Your salvation is not earned. You can't work for your salvation, but through faith. But when it comes to faith, it does require actions. Actions that expresses your faith. It doesn't mean that you deserve it, if that makes sense. And so that's what this woman did. She acted out of her faith, even though people are gonna laugh at her, even if people disregarded her because of her being an outsider, being unclean in the community. She still acted upon faith, and because of her faith, she experienced healing of Jesus. And then obviously this whole demon-possessed person, I felt like it's like whenever the presence of Jesus is around demons, that's when they start to freak out. Whenever the name of Jesus is being mentioned, their names are freaking out. They freak out because they really do not like Jesus. And so I don't know, it's like I don't know how we can apply this into our life, because I still believe that demons do exist. They are common, but I don't really know how to tell you, oh, if you find this person, you act this way, that means they're demonically possessed. I don't think everybody who denies Jesus are demonically possessed, if that makes sense. But yeah, I hope what I shared is helpful, that sometimes Jesus, when the crowd laughed at him, sometimes Jesus works in ways that we don't understand, works in ways that we find very childish. But if we find things childish, I think that's where we need to remind ourselves to stay humble before God, if we want to experience His love, experience His presence. So may you guys go and walk with Christ today.